So on this session, we're going to focus on creating spinal flexibility, strength, and awareness. So we're going to have a couple of basic patterns, like forward fold, rolling the spine downwards, some rotations on the knees, on the floor. You can also use the wall for some of these, just to help you create that awareness of which segment is moving when. Okay, so first one is going to be fairly simple. Be free to do these ones for reps, for the duration of the time, whichever you prefer, and you can do them daily. So as I'm in this standing position, I'm going to reach up with my hands, then I'm going to tuck my chin to the chest, I'm going to roll my upper back, mid back, lower back, going all the way down into forward fold, and then from there, simply going to reverse. So I'm reversing, lower back, mid back, upper back, neck. Okay, so let's give it a go. So reaching, coordinated with your breath, rolling your spine all the way down, reversing all the way up, rolling all the way down, reversing all the way up. Segment by segment. And that's something that you can also practice with keeping your back on the wall. So think about, as you're rolling down, you're kind of moving your head first, your upper back, mid back, lower back, and so on. And then reversing as you go back up. Okay? You can also combine this with reaching upwards in this arch position, and then rolling your spine downwards. So it's slightly more advanced variation. So going from this flexion into extension, and then rolling the spine down. Rolling the spine up, rolling the spine down. Okay? And always have your glutes engaged, especially as you're arching, have your abs also engaged. So the next part in this spinal intelligence series is going to be this kneeling rotation. So spine and rib cage, let's not forget about rib cage, can move in so many different areas, and we're quite often stuck in this sort of linear pattern, forwards, backwards, left and right. Okay? And you can move anywhere in between when you think of it. So first one, in this kneeling position, you're just going to revisit basic cat-cow. So this is a good first start. So shoulders above your hands, knees underneath your hips. So think about, as you're arching, so creating this gap, pushing downwards, keeping your arms straight. I'm trying to extend my neck, looking up as much as I can. Then ribs in, tucking in my tailbone, tucking in my chin. And just get used to this pattern. That will be number one. Couple of reps here. And again, this is one of the motions that you can do at any point during the day. Okay? So the next addition would be, so if I'm kneeling in this position, if you think of your head, neck, the rest of the spine, there's this now central pillar or column, and think about starting to rotate around. So if you're just doing cat and cow in this plane of motion, now we also have this. As I'm keeping my arms straight, just to have a little bit of limitation, my rib cage is sort of driving on one side and then other side, so sideways. So stretching the rib cage, moving the spine from side to side. So you have up and down, left and right, and then you have anywhere in between as well. So what this is going to look like, let's say clockwise first. I'm sinking my spine down, then I'm going to the left side, and then I'm starting to draw a circle. That's always a good idea, so always try to visualize something. Let's say drawing a circle, moving the spine around. So although we have these limitations, arms straight, couple of points of contact on the floor, I really want to move the remaining structures as much as possible. And notice, also I'm moving my head. So if my spine is going in one side, one direction, for example left, I'm moving my head to the right. Another way around. So it might take a little bit of practice for that, but it's a really good practice. And then after, let's say 30 seconds, 60 seconds or reps, make sure to change direction. Okay? So just to go through that again. So start with cat-cow. So arching, rounding, left, right, and then start drawing a circle. Might take you a little bit of practice to get there, especially if you're new to this, but yeah, it's a very satisfying one. Okay, on to the next one. So the idea for the next move in this series I got from Animal Flow, just called Wave Unload. It's a very beautiful sort of transitional motion where you go from almost something resembling the squat, lifting your hips up, and then gradually rolling the spine like a wave, hence the name, all the way from this rounded position into extended position. So just quickly to show you, so think about this position. You're basically in the same position and my knees are off the floor. It's almost like I want to catapult myself forward like a frog. Heels off the floor, knees off the floor and sideways. I want to make sure my hands are far enough forward, not too far, not too close, just so I have space to move. So from here, step number one would be to lift my hips up, rounding my back, tucking my chin to the chest. Okay, notice how I'm going up on my toes and then going back. So up, going back, tucking my chin to the chest, up and back. When you get used to that, the next part will be this. So lifting the hips up, tucking in your tailbone, and now rolling. Notice that impulse is traveling up. Hips are the highest, and notice the impulse. Now, from my hips being highest, I'm rolling my spine, mid back, lower back, mid back, keeping my arms straight, keeping my shoulders protracted. Notice I'm gradually dropping my hips, and then eventually I'm going up with my head. And then I can either go with my feet on the floor, knees on the floor, or keeping my knees on the floor, looking up. So that's step number one. From there, you can return back, and again, so lifting up, rolling. Notice my chin, giving my chin to my chest, up until the very last moment. Looking up, you can even add looking left, one side, other side. And again, up. So arching, extension, then rounding as you go back. So take your time with this one. It can feel a little bit more strengthy, a little more tension, especially in your wrist and your shoulders as opposed to the previous two variations, but it's a very nice, satisfying movement as well. You can always record yourself just to sort of observe what's happening with your spine, how you create that ripple effect. So it's like a wave, your hips, and then your lower back, mid back, upper back, and then your neck. Okay, so from rounding into extension, another way around. Take your time. And the last part in this series would be this rotation, lying rotation on the floor. So one of my favorite movements. So you're starting in this position, arms in this T position, making sure you have some space on the sides. Okay, so notice my knees here. I'm allowing my knees gently to go from side to side. Okay, so that's the step number one. As you go towards one side with your knees, so if you're going towards your left side, think about straightening your right leg, going around this leg, not lifting off the floor, I'm keeping it on the floor, and I'm trying to reach my hand as close as I can. Slowly going back in the middle, both knees up, that's starting position, straight away other side, without shuffling too much. So as you return back, knees up, straight away from there, transition with the knees to the right, left leg towards the right side. And you can start doing it very slowly. Notice how one leg goes around the other one and stays on the floor. When you're starting to get a hang of it, you can include and add some speed. If you want more challenge, you can place your hands even higher, so you really need to reach high. If you can't reach your hands, it's perfectly fine. Just going as far as you can while keeping your feet on the floor. It's a great way to work your lower back and that nice rotation of the spine. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this mini series. This is sort of one of the fundamental patterns, but it's I would say it definitely has its place in everyone's practice, no matter how advanced you are. So hope you enjoyed it. Take care and see you soon. So the idea behind lower body mobility or hip flow is to get familiar and get more comfortable being closer to the floor. So rather than just using linear sets and reps of linear exercises for increasing, developing mobility and flexibility, and there's absolutely nothing wrong, they have their place. I'm a big fan of actually spending more time on the floor. And then with a little bit of structure, sort of spending more time in between positions and transitioning. Okay, so as you probably know, any position, if you're spending long time in that position, is detrimental long term for the health. So it's actually transition and often change between positions, that it's a really important factor here. Okay, so first one that we're gonna do is just being seated in this position, this straddle position. Okay, so make sure you can also bend your knees if your hamstrings are super tight. Maybe for some of you, if you can't sit in this position leaning forward, you're gonna have to lean back a little bit. With any of these movements that I'm gonna show, you can easily regress by simply helping yourself a little bit more with your hands. The more comfortable you get with certain movements, be free to use less and less of your hands. Okay, so ideally you want to have this floor just a little bit smoother, tiny bit of space. So starting in this straddle, so here what I want to do, while keeping my torso upright, I'm going to go from side, going back, other side in this shin box, one side or mid straddle, other side, middle position, other side. You can also make this easier by keeping your hands, as I mentioned earlier, on the floor if you struggle to stay upright. So this would be level 1. Okay. Level 2 would be going from this shin box position, is lifting your hips up. So for some of you this might be uncomfortable, so think about while keeping your shins in the same position, hence the name shin box. You're gonna lift your hips up into extension, so driving your hips forward, and then helping yourself going down. Going back in the straddle, other side, lifting yourself up, coming down. When you get sort of comfortable with this, try to use your hands less and less. Almost using the hard floor to sort of give yourself a massage, poor man's massage. Nice. If you're a little bit bony like me, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but the idea behind this is to sort of get used to it, to get conditioned to it, okay? So when you did a couple of these, you can also add a little bit of this. So let's say you're on one side, so I'm giving you a couple of options. You can also play around with, not necessarily with this order. So when you're in this shin box position, you can also go in this 90-90. So that means opening your legs a little bit. So shin box, 90-90. Shin box, 90-90. From here, torso facing the inner part of your foot, of your leg, reaching as far as you can, and then either pausing there, stretching the hip, anytime you want to, or you can do it for reps. So going down, transitioning, other side, 90-90, other side, okay? And again, help yourself with your hands. If you must, if you can already do this comfortably, do it without helping yourself with your hands. Awesome. And then we can transition into a little bit of internal rotation. So if you're in this seated position, I'm helping myself with my hands, fingers pointing behind. I'm going to go wider with my feet, chest facing forward. One knee is going in and then going back. Other knee going in, going back. One knee in and back, other one. This might feel a little bit tender, so really take it easy, don't rush. This is a great way to sort of warm up or work on hip mobility, especially internal rotation on its own. And again, if you want to make it a bit harder, keep your chest facing upright. Or you can lift your feet off the floor, although it might be a little bit awkward, okay? So find a variation that suits for you. So just to go back, so we have straddle, shin box, we have hip extension from shin box, sitting down, then we have 90, 90, and then we have internal rotation. We'll always do both sides, obviously, okay? So what we can also do is from this shin box, we can go up in extension, but then here, I can bring this leg here, and I can sit down on the heels, and now we have this lovely position called seiza, okay? So again, hip extension, this knee back, I'm sliding back, or I can lift it off the floor, coming down. And again, take your time, have a little bit of patience, because this initially can be a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, so from shin box, extension, coming here, legs together, sitting down. There's also one more way to go from shin box onto the floor, sorry, from seiza onto the floor, is simply, you can help yourself with your hands again, dropping your hips, not dropping, gently putting your hip down on the floor, going back in a straddle, legs together. So I can make it so much easier by simply helping myself with my hands. It's already quite effective work on its own. Okay? So again, let's go back from the beginning. You have straddle, you have shin box, you have 90 degrees, hip fold, okay? You can lift your hips up, and it doesn't even need to be each position very strict. You can sort of be somewhere in between. For example, lifting your hips up from 90-90. It's going to be a little bit less. It's going to be less range of motion, but it's still a good way to practice. Okay, and then we have hip internal rotations, and then sitting in seiza. And from seiza, you can also work a little bit on ankle mobility and toe stretch as you're leaning back and then forwards. Stretching your, tucking your toes, stretching your toes, mine are horrible. And then untucking your toes as you lean back, stretching the front of your quads, front of your hips, and the front of your ankles. So you can also play with these, okay? Then at some point, from this straddle, we also have one of my favorites, which is gonna be this. So bringing one leg in, other leg over, okay? So from straddle, you can repeat this just straight after me, just so we're on the same page. So left leg is coming through, coming towards you, right leg in front of your left ankle, and from here, I'm trying to reach forward, lifting myself on my foot and on this shin. And then from here, I can either go back, switch, lift up, come back, switch, reach, gently lift up, come back, reach, switch, come back. Or I can take this one step further, reaching, toe stretch, sitting on the heel, knee comes forward. So notice the position. Going back, switching. We're going to do this again. So same thing as earlier, lifting up, lifting the heel, toe stretch, this knee is still on the floor, this knee comes forward, come back. So one more time each side. So you have a couple of options now to sort of navigate through space, staying close to the floor, sort of folding the joints, washing the joints of sorts, okay? So if this was including lots of sort of hip flexion, hip compression, some rotation as well, you can also play with a little bit of extension. So for that you can go in kneeling position, in this kneeling position, so fairly classic stretch, so tucking in your tailbone, which is already going to give you a nice stretch on the front of your quad, squeezing your glutes, and then driving the hip down, simultaneously working on the ankle flexibility of the front. If I want to go back, I can also straighten this leg, working a little bit on hamstring flexibility and ankle plantar flexion. So leaning forward, making sure I'm squeezing that glutes, and then going back. Either with your hands or without, if it feels okay. With or without. And then I can change. Notice how I simply used some of the previously mentioned movements to transition from one into the other one. And this one probably, the softer the floor, you might find it a little bit easier initially as opposed to harder floor. So those are a couple of options. So hip extension, hip flexion, internal, external rotation. And the last one that I would probably show you here, it would be, you're gonna go on the hands and it's gonna tie nicely into sort of crawling and locomotion pattern, which is gonna be sort of scorpion reach. So opening the hips a little bit more, but you're gonna load your hands and your shoulders a little bit more. So you're going in downward dog, okay? So from here, think about lifting your left leg. So as high as you can, bend your knees, point your toes. This leg, I'm trying to reach my knee as high as I can. So hip extension. And then when I'm on my highest level, I want to open my hip. So I'm adding this extra twist. Pausing for a second or two, coming down. Other side, lifting up. So hip extension, opening, and then twisting, opening even more. And you can just keep switching from side to side. Opening, twisting. Other side, opening, twisting. Just make sure you have some space. Okay? So I could easily add a few more movements here, but I think this is sort of plenty. If at any point from some of these you also want to perhaps go into the squat and stay there for a bit, that's also a great way to practice this. So for example, from shin box, I'm going back here, just showing you a few variations. I can go in on my toes, coming back. I can help myself with my hands. So from shin box, I can use my hand to push myself up into the squat. So even if I go to the squat or from the squat to the floor, I'm not gonna do this. So if you had a fall, if you're gonna experience a fall, you're never just gonna collapse down. You're always gonna go do what? Place your hand first, hip, and then knees. Push back. Notice how I'm using the other arm for kind of gaining a little bit of momentum. Coming back, sitting down. Up and down. Up and down. From side to side. Just from this angle, hand on the floor, pushing. And you can go from side to side. So that's it. Hopefully some of these make sense. So remember, these are all just rough suggestions. So be free, so you have a couple of options. Be free to use this to sort of spend as much time as you can, comfortably can, being close to the floor. So squat and then everything lower from the squat. Because I really think there's so much value there. So unless you experience some very deep discomfort or pain, I think everyone should be able to sort of do these patterns. So if you have any sort of suggestions, any feedback, any tips, any ideas, let me know. So arm swings. This is incredibly useful pattern to use for either warm-up or towards the end of the session to getting rid of the unnecessary parasitical tension that you might be having, okay? British origins are from martial arts, various martial arts. But yeah, I would say they all share sort of similar qualities. The main intention here, what I would say, is to keep, you don't want to create too much tension in your arms. So the motion in your arms can even start potentially not in your arms. So I'm moving my leg, my arm moves as result. So you want to have this is going to expose any potential disconnect between the upper and lower body, okay? Or I wouldn't say disconnect, maybe just lack of awareness, or maybe working a little bit more on coordinating these areas better. So the first one that I like to do is always feet grounded, this side to side, arms completely relaxed. So I'm looking behind myself. I always like to use this almost on every session as a sort of intro part, as a warm-up, keeping this nice and stable base of support, center of mass. Knees slightly bent, very stable here. And then you decide how far you want to go. Just remember, I don't want to do this. My arms are like noodles, completely relaxed, as opposed to keeping them super tight, okay? So be mindful of that. So every time looking behind myself, and notice how I lead with my chest, and my arms are simply there, following with a little bit of delay. You can play with that variation. You can also play with a variation where you're looking in front of you, and your arms are now initiating a little bit more. Completely relaxed. I always like to superset this with also the next one. So reaching up, visualize throwing a bucket of icy water behind you, okay? So notice this, almost like a, I would say, golf swing. I never play golf, I'm just assuming. So reaching behind you, so creating this nice spiral. Going down, so I don't want to do this, breaking the movement. So it's nice continuous movement, going from side to side. Notice I'm using my momentum. I'm going down and up. Down, behind, and up. And again, you decide how far you want to go, how fast, and how much into this torsion, how much into this twist and rotation. And always good idea to coordinate this with your breath. So just to go back, so we have arm swing from side to side. We have this side to side spiral, okay? So the next one that I really like is, again, starting with the bouncing in your feet. So having this connection between your feet and the upper body. So bouncing to your knees, pushing with your knees, with your feet into the floor. And now each bounce represents one arm swing. So one arm swing forward is one bounce going back. So notice. So I don't want to do this. Sort of having disconnect here. So one bounce, one swing. You can play with some coordinations, making it more complex, but for now let's just keep it simple. So basically this one is also amazing, as you can ideally do this for multiple reps, several minutes without getting too fatigued, because I'm using this nice effortless sort of amortization of the body, suspension. Arms completely relaxed. If you're starting to notice tingling sensations in your fingertips, that's usually a good sign. And now here, you have a couple of variations. One that I really like that I learned from recent Ferris anime Terra Nova Intensive is every once in a while you want to throw your arms further into extension. So this, further back into extension, almost like you want to jump or you're skiing, okay? And then every once in a while, without losing your rhythm, lifting your arms up into flexion. And notice how I want to jump, like my heels are going off the floor, I'm reaching towards the sky, but I'm not jumping. So jumping without jumping. So arm swing, backwards, and upwards, so spinal flexion, not flexion, shoulder flexion, backwards, upwards, and so on. And then at some point you can transition into one forwards, one backwards. So now I add a little bit of rotation from side to side with my chest. So I'm really using my arms, using the gravity to help me. Okay, so dropping my arms, allowing my arms to come down softly. And this is already great variation. The one that I like to connect with this one, that might take you a little bit more practice, is now, so think about basic arm circle, which you can also do, but keeping your arm relaxed rather than keeping it rigid. So think about this. Your arm sideways can travel backwards and then forwards. Again, notice how I'm using my knees. Every time that any of the arms is up on the top, use it to drop down. So the idea behind this, so think about contralateral pattern as you walk. One arm backwards, one arm forwards. So you can start very slowly, very softly. The key point here, where I always see when people struggle with this, they miss it, is notice how I'm rotating my chest as well, at least in the beginning. And then when I'm at the top, so remember, each arm is going in the opposite direction. So not this, not doing this, not doing this. It's a perfectly fine pattern as well, but now we're in contra. So opposite. So start slowly, and then as you're getting a hang of it, you can start adding a little bit of speed, use the gravity, use your breath, get comfortable, then you can play with switching directions. Switch. Switch. Switch, and so on, okay? So just to quickly go again, we have a side swing, arms from side to side, and then we have up and behind, this spiral one, okay? Then we have shoulder extensions and flexions, further into extension, further into flexion, contra, and then contra full pattern. I'm pretty sure these were all, I didn't miss any, okay? Next one is one that I really like, just to keep it simple, just to have a little bit more side to side plane of motion. I'll give you two variations. So first one, so think about drawing infinity symbol with your index finger, or drawing number 8, whatever you want to call it. So again, try to have your feet sort of angled, not angled, grounded. And start small. Notice this, I'm starting very small. So how relaxed can my arm be? And also the rest of the body. So aim for this. You always want to be able to do this for a couple of minutes without getting tired. Using the momentum as you cut through the air. So as you get more comfortable, I just hit my fingers. I'll survive. So keep going, then faster and faster. And notice how I started here, but now I'm actually starting to add a little bit of rotation, going from side to side, almost like arm is going behind, okay? And then you can do the other one. And you're probably gonna find that one sort of direction as opposed to the other one feels a little bit more natural. So first of all, play with any pattern that feels more natural. So slow, first, small, and then gradually more and more. And I don't know if you can see, if you can notice, but I'm actually actively using my legs, the rest of my body, to generate the force, to generate this movement. And then again, as you get more comfortable, start to go more and more. And let's do one more. This is again one of the starting arm swings that I learned from Fighting Monkey, amazing collective, check them out. So going from side to side, so arms are here, one arm going from one side, other side. So almost like I'm creating this space with my arms for other one to clap. So from here I clap to the top of the hand, swinging down, waiting for my other one. Obviously it's going to be less robotic when you start. So it's one of those things, the faster you do, especially when you get a hang of it, the easier it gets. So again, notice my body. So rather than focusing on my arms and being super robotic, I'm sinking down, using the forces to go from side to side. Touching your arm, really swinging down, up. Facing from one side, other side. One side, other side. And then you can travel through space if you wish. One side, other side. It's almost like a weird dance. That's only optional, especially if you're doing it in public. If you don't want to do this, that's fine. And yeah, I think that's plenty for now. There are more than few other more complex variations, but I would say for some basic arm swings patterns, this is amazing, and you can use it on its own to get rid of some upper body tension as a warm up, or towards the end of the session if you want a little bit more softening. Just make sure. It's very easy, especially if you're new to this, to transition into creating too much tension in your neck, shoulders, upper back. So keep it loose. Use your legs. Okay? So hope this is helpful. Let me know how it goes. So in today's video, I'm going to show you a couple of basic crawling locomotion, animal locomotion patterns that I really like to use for conditioning, for warm-up. Quite often they can be used also for therapy. Okay, so it's not going to be anything too high impact. You want to have a little bit of free space to move around, and ideally you want to be barefoot so you can really feel the weight shifts in your toes, your ankles, and your hands. Okay, so first one, the basic one that probably most of you know, is just basic bear crawl or tiki or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so there are a couple of variations, couple of schools that teach this a bit differently. So one of them is keeping it very rigid. So for example, if I'm doing scapular push-up, which is this, I'm doing the motion from my shoulders, keeping my ribs in, core engaged, opposite arm, opposite leg. Okay, so this is one variation. But I'm not really that much interested in that today. What I would propose rather to keep it more loose but efficient. So keeping a little bit of tension, but only as much as necessary, not too much tension. Okay? So really allow your shoulders to move, your shoulder blades to move on your rib cage, because it is designed to move. Okay? So similar to walking, opposite leg, opposite arm, we're gonna do that. So starting forwards, backwards, fairly linear. So one arm forwards, one foot forwards. Opposite arm forwards, opposite foot forwards. Okay? I can go backwards. Okay? Then I can go slightly sideways. If I go sideways, observe this. I can cross my legs. Usually it involves this. When your feet are coming closer together, hands are further apart. Another way around. Okay, I can also cross. And anywhere in between. Okay? So we have a couple of patterns already. Forwards, backwards, sideways. So again, I'm not giving you reps or sets. These are just suggestions. It's always good to be mindful of how you place your hand as well, which is going to be useful for other variations as well. So for this one, rather than just mindlessly slapping your hand onto the floor, initially that might be the case, but I would propose gradually, the more you slow down, obviously this is going to be more difficult, but really be mindful how you place your hand, how you weight shift. Also how you place your foot. Great drill for coordination, strength, flexibility, and so on. Okay? So forwards, backwards, sideways. We're gonna revisit that again. But this one, if you noticed, we kind of spent some of the time majority of the time facing the floor. How about facing it upwards? So that means an animal flow. This is called crab. Think about pushing downwards to your shoulders. Okay? And again, I don't want to be too rigid here. I'm really not that interested in that rigidity rather than efficiency. Being energy efficient. So opposite arm, opposite leg. Opposite leg, opposite arm. And even more so than that previous scroll, notice now as I move, if I'm going backwards, how I want to place my fingers first and my toes. Obviously you can do other way around as well. So there is no right or wrong here. You can also go sideways with this one. It might be a little bit more tricky. It's a good coordination drill. Even I sometimes get stuck. Whatever you do with these ones, try not to get stuck and overthink it. Just keep on moving. Usually body has a solution and intuitively gonna do probably something that works. And the more capacity, the more movement vocabulary you have, the better it's gonna become, the more efficient it's gonna become. And now how are we gonna transition from facing the floor? So this into this. So what I just shown, so you have under switch. So if I want to go on this side, I'm lifting the opposite arm, opposite leg. So if I'm going towards the right side, I'm lifting my left leg, right arm, until I switch here, okay? Same way I can go back. Same way I can go back, and so on, okay? But you can also play with this one. So for example, going over. So from this variation, if I want to go to the left, my right leg sweeps over. I come here. One more time from this angle. Sweeping till I come here, okay? There are also variations of this movement where you keep your hips up high. I would say keep it low, keep your center of mass fairly here. This is much more tension based. It's a good mobility and flexibility drill, shoulder extension strengthening, but right now keep your hips low. Keep your hips low and loose, okay? So couple of transitions, so under switch, over switch, okay, under switch, and straight away under switch can go into over switch. Okay, so very simple transition that you can already play with, and that transition is giving you more options. So when you, for example, if you're doing this for conditioning purposes for like a few minutes, you can transition from one plane of motion to other orientation as well, okay? And I would say from here you have one more. So if we had over with this leg from this bare position, we have also over from this one. So that means I'm also gonna go from one side, so leg goes over. So this would be under, this would be over. And notice how I like to use the floor to sort of sweep on the floor rather than lifting my legs off, okay? Okay, over, few steps, position, under, and so on. So you can practice transitions, but I would always say they are just addition to connect all these patterns. So even if you have small space, this is a great way to sort of warm up, prep the wrists, shoulders, rib cage, spine, hips, knees, ankles. This crawling pattern, these crawling patterns are surprisingly also tough or intense on the legs. So despite you might think it's very upper body dominant, it's actually very lower body dominant as well. So I'm just gonna now shut up, I'm gonna be quiet, and I'm just gonna give you example of few movements uninterrupted. So I'm gonna try to do it for like a minute or so. So I would always say keep it slow and mindful, really be mindful of each weight shift. And yeah, putting timer anywhere between 1 to 5 minutes, especially 5 minutes, it can get like super hard, but very good and efficient work, okay? So yeah, I'm gonna say goodbye now. I'm gonna put music and I'm just gonna go with the flow.